Are you white? Are you male? Are you straight, religious, conservative, or heck, even just politically centrist? There's a good chance that the entire tech industry absolutely hates your guts, hates everything about you, and will work very hard to make sure you are not allowed to exist within the tech industry. Now, many of you are saying, hold on a second, Lunduke, hold your horses. That is an outrageous claim. That is preposterous. That is insane. You surely must be getting confused. You must be lying. You must be projecting. You must be something, but that can't possibly be true. Allow me to walk you through a teeny tiny selection of examples that prove that pretty much undeniably. It is painful to look at. I'm not gonna lie. It is awful. I dislike it very much. But just the same, that is the situation that we are in. The entire tech industry, we're talking foundations, big tech corporations, and even little open source projects absolutely hate you. Hate, not don't like you, not disagree with you, but hate who you are if you fall into any of those categories. Oh my gosh. And if you're a combination of those, like let's say you're a straight white male who's religious and conservative, oh my gosh. Oh my word, you are basically the devil himself according to the majority of the tech industry. Case in point, IBM and Red Hat. I've been covering the IBM and Red Hat leaks for quite a number of months now. There are lawsuits going on because of it. And we know from those leaks, full out, and again, everything I'm showing you here, I am going to link to. So if you are listening to the podcast, watching the video, wherever you're watching it, I'm going to provide you links to all of this. So you can go through and verify every ounce of it for yourself, every single quote. And I'm going to be clear. None of this is my opinion. That's the crazy thing about what you're about to see. All of this is direct quotes from CEOs, presidents, vice presidents, founders of organizations, and the very, very senior leadership, not random employees, not users or contributors to project. No. The founders, the leaders, the executives, the actual corporate policies. Those are the only things that I'm going to be telling you about here. So what we're talking about is literally systemic. A lot of people have liked to yell over the last few years about things like systemic racism. Well, you want to see what real systemic bigotry looks like? Look at the tech industry. Now, sure, many of you are going to say, Lunduke, this sort of thing happens outside of tech as well. I know tech. So I'm going to talk about tech. I don't know the oil industry. I don't know the food service industry. You could say maybe some of this is happening there, but I know tech. And that's where this is happening, and I'm going to show you all the details. IBM and Red Hat. I've been covering this for a while. They actually have policies in place to hire and fire people entirely based on their skin color. What skin color do they fire people for having? White skin color. That's not a joke. That is an actual thing that's happening. The IBM CEO himself is on video verifying that they fire people who refuse to discriminate against white people. I'm going to repeat that. The CEO of IBM is on video, not doctored video, but actual IBM video declaring that people are getting fired because they refuse to discriminate against white people. And in fact, there are lawsuits already going on for that. I believe I've got that right here. Yes, a lawsuit was filed on beginning of May against Red Hat for racial discrimination, along with religious discrimination and other things as well. And so this is really a real thing that's happening right now. It's not a deniable thing. In fact, and this is crazy to me, but there is an actual slide deck you can read. I highly recommend you guys go through this. It's called the Allyship Kickoff presentation from Red Hat, the world's largest Linux company and a subsidiary of IBM, where they literally detail a list of words that you can use to describe white people. They're all negative words. And a list of words you can use to describe non-white people. They're all positive words. Because those are the approved words you can use against people. They talk about white people and specifically say that they're evil. Now, You were saying, well, Lunduke, that can't possibly be true. Read it. I published the entirety of the full leaked slide deck, full PowerPoint files with all of the commentary, all of the presenter notes, everything is in there. You can go read it for yourself. This has been verified, and you can publicly verify it because the people who made this presentation, presented it, and approved it are public about having done so. So again, Red Hat and IBM, huge mega corporations, they have policies in place to hire and fire people based on their skin color, and specifically to hire less white people because they don't like white people. Is that awful? Is that racist? Yes, of course it is. Because anytime you're discriminating against someone based on the hue of your skin, you're doing something naughty. Now, this has been going on for a while. There's lawsuits happening. It's awful. But it's not just IBM and Red Hat. That's not the only place it's happening. If it were, we could chalk this up to a one-off issue and say, oh, well, things are bad within IBM and Red Hat. But that simply isn't the case. In fact, a vice president of Microsoft is literally out there giving presentations to people to encourage people. I'm going to show you a picture of him giving the presentation with the slide deck, encouraging people to commit felonies against white men and be willing to go to jail for those crimes. A quote, accomplices will go to jail for you. To quote, to create an inclusive tech environment, we need accomplices more than allies. What does accomplice mean? Accomplice means someone who helps you to commit a crime. He even has a slide up there literally saying exactly that. And he encourages people to commit crimes against white people. Now, you're saying to yourself, that's preposterous. No one would do that. Well, I have a picture of him with a slide of it, and multiple people on the internet were also in attendance. I was actually there when he gave that presentation, and also reported that he did the same thing. And a lot of them loved it. Oh, how great. Oh, so brave. He's encouraging people to commit crimes against white people for it. Okay. So a lot of you might now be saying, okay, so even if you can prove it, which we just did, that he went out there and encouraged, as an employee of Microsoft, people to commit crimes against white people, which I assume means to attack and hurt white people. Well, that's just one person. Aha. After giving this presentation, after it was brought to the attention of their human resources department, and I know it happened because I was one of the people that brought it to their attention, he got a promotion. He's a vice president at Microsoft. Microsoft officially sanctions committing crimes against white people and being willing to go to jail for it. Now, to me, personally, I don't love that idea. I'm going to be straight with you. I am not going to encourage anyone to commit crimes against anyone because that's not cool. Don't attack or hurt anybody. We don't do that. That's not a thing we do. You'll note that as we go through all of these, all of the examples are of people on one political spectrum, very left-leaning, encouraging violence, encouraging discrimination, encouraging harm, encouraging discrimination against people who are white, male, straight, religious, conservative, centrist, etc. Right? People who they feel are too far to the right, which includes centrists. You'll find no examples in here of people who leadership, like CEOs and executives and whatnot, that are politically right or even politically centrist, encouraging hate against people on the left. You'll find no examples, none, of any big tech company having an official policy stating let's hire less black people. You won't find that. You will, however, see examples, like we just went over, of official companies saying let's hire less white people, right? It is one-sided. It is one side of the tech industry attacking the other side. And that side, that left-leaning political side of the tech industry, has almost total control of the entirety of the tech industry, whether it be Microsoft like this, or Red Hat, or IBM, or Google, or others. It is insane. I want to bring this to you guys' attention just because it is relevant. when they talk about being willing to go to jail, to commit crimes against certain segments of people, white people, male people, etc., right-leaning people is what the insinuation is. What exactly are they protecting? Well, from the Microsoft's case, they have a very big push internally to gender transition children within Microsoft. So if you're in Microsoft, you probably will have seen this. There is a gender transitioning young children document. They call it, it covers gender treatment and services for family members. It's this really, really big document. I cover it rather in length. I have a leaked copy here, and I've published a whole bunch of it. And it talks about literally gender transitioning 3-year-olds, which is horrific. But if you disagree with this, you are attacked rather viciously. I published this article back on April 14th earlier this year, and oh my word, the threats of violence I received from the left were off the charts, and some of it I'm going to show you in a moment. This isn't just the big tech companies. It applies to the medium tech companies too. Here's some quotes from people who work at SUSE. Now, many of you are like, who the heck is SUSE? SUSE is the oldest Linux company in the world. Well, a very big open source company. They make a ton of money. They're not as big as Red Hat or IBM, but they're very, very large and very dominant in the space that they work in. Well, they have an official policy of, quote, cutting out the rotten flesh of who? People who are conservative, or people who do not advocate for gender transitioning of children. Right? Now, this is a very real thing. Someone recently, sometime last year, brought up, hey, you know what? Maybe as a tech company, as a tech organization, SUSE and some of their sub-open source projects known as OpenSUSE, we shouldn't necessarily align ourselves with political organizations. We should just focus on the technology. The result of that was rather intense and crazy, where board members of the open source organization and employees of the company came out and declared that anyone who didn't excitedly wave the transgender flag and declare that transgenderism was good was rotten flesh. And they use that phrase over and over again. Rotten flesh that needs to come out. Their membership needs to be revoked. They need to be banned from the organization. They said this over and over and over and over again. Yes, rotten flesh is an apt description. I would hope, quote, that they find that every other Linux, open source, and free software community is equally unwelcoming to them, end quote. Over and over again. Are you conservative? Are you not in agreement with one of their political ideals? Then you are rotten flesh, you are unwelcome, and you are banned. Now, the result of this was that many, many, many people were actually banned from these organizations, from the OpenSUSE organization in particular. I got a huge wave of people who came to me and was like, dude, I just got banned. They kicked me off their mailing list. They kicked me off their forums. They revoked my membership. I'm not allowed to vote for board members anymore. And basically they were cleaning house. They were saying, if you don't advocate for little kids getting gender transitioned, you were rotten flesh and need to be cut out. This sort of thing happens over and over again. If you don't conform to exactly what we want, politically, religiously, if you are gender and sexuality wise, if you are not the right skin color, you are not welcome. You are either fired, banned, etc. Over and over again. And this goes beyond the companies. Beyond the companies, we're talking about tech foundations as well. Here is one of my all-time favorites. This is from Mozilla, right? The makers of Firefox. They came out with this a couple years back, and their policies have remained the same since then. In fact, they've pushed a little bit further. But they very clearly declared this, that they need, quote, more than deplatforming. Right? So what does that mean? So what they were referring to was that some people got kicked off of Twitter and other social media, including, at the time, President Donald Trump was kicked off of social media, and it was declared deplatforming him. Now, Mozilla came out and said that's a good thing. Anytime you remove someone who's politically On the right or politically centrist, Mozilla declared that's a good thing. They said how great it was to get rid of a sitting president off of online platforms. It should not be allowed. But they went further and said that we need more than just deplatforming, that we need to do more as Mozilla, as web browsers, as web services, as companies, to remove these people from society. Now, what is more than not allowing them to exist online at all? Because that's what they're talking about. They're saying deplatforming, not being allowed to exist online, is not enough. They had to go further. What exactly is further than that? Now, in my opinion, I can't think of a whole lot other than put you in a gulag, murder you. I don't know. I don't know what is you tell me, what is further than you're not allowed to be on the internet? That is Mozilla's official position. So the people who create Red Hat, right? One of the big web browsers, that's their official position. It's wild, it's crazy. And there's so many examples of these tech foundations, and they're big. We're talking hundreds of millions, a $250 million or more in revenue and cash on hand. These are big organizations, huge. The Linux Foundation, for example, big organization, $250 million every year comes in from Microsoft and from all manner of different big tech companies. Well, back a couple of years ago, they actually started banning people from their events if they supported the wrong political candidate. I covered this one some years back, where it was literally a man was banned from going to KubeCon, which is a Kubernetes conference. You don't have to know what that is, but essentially it was a open source technology conference. He was banned from going to it because some person that wasn't even attending it went online and saw that guy in a picture wearing a red Make America Great Again hat. And so they were angry. They started yelling about it. They started yelling about how that doesn't make people safe. People are unsafe because someone might wear a red hat to a conference, which is funny because one of the big tech companies that pushes this sort of discrimination and awfulness is called Red Hat. But I digress. And the Linux Foundation said, yeah, of course, we gotta ban this guy. He can't come to events. He can't come to events. If he's at an event and he's a guy who would vote for Trump, oh my gosh, he can't be allowed. Nobody will be safe. We'll all die, right? If you have the wrong politics, centrist or conservative, you are not welcome. You are absolutely not welcome. It's ridiculous. I mean, this doesn't just go to a singular event. It's part of the culture here. These are some of the policies of the Linux Foundation. I covered this sometime back as well, but they have very specific discriminatory and exclusionary policies, such as they do not allow all male panels or speaker lineups. Now, even if it just randomly happens, they don't allow it. Why? Because they do not want men. They want less men. Men are bad. That's the only thing I can think of. Now, do I personally have a problem with all male or all female speaker lineups? No. Why would I? I want all great speaker lineups. I want the best speakers. I could care less if they're white, if they're black, if they're Chinese, if they're male or female. I don't care. I don't care what religion they are. If I'm going to a tech conference and I want to hear some speakers talk about really cool things, do I care what they talk about? Do I care that they put on a good presentation where I leave informed and excited and whatnot? Or do I care that I went in there and I saw the right hue of skin or the right genitals? No, I don't care about that. I want to see a good conference. That's not what the Linux Foundation wants. They want there to be discrimination, but only against men. And that's clear. Now, it goes further than that, though. They have multiple events that occur within these events that exclude white men and nobody else, right? They have the women and non-binary luncheons. They have power-up receptions. They have better together luncheons. They have multiple events that exclude just white men. Now, do they exclude anyone else from anything? No. Are there white men events? No. The one group that gets excluded are people who are white, people who are male, people who are religious, and people who are conservative. Those are the groups that get discriminated against by the Linux Foundation and so many other foundations. That's not cool. That is hate, right? We're not talking about policies that make a whole lot of sense here. We're talking about policies that are enacted because of hate against a group of people. You wouldn't say, we're going to hire anyone but this one group because yuck, unless you hate that group. You don't talk about banning people from events unless you hate the group they come from. Right? There's no reasons for a lot of this stuff. It's just pure hate. They even do funding for bringing people to events, scholarship funding, which is great, but only if you are not a straight white male. Right? If you're anything other than a straight white male, that very narrow group, right? Straight, white, and male. Those are the only that. If you're anything else, anything at all, you can apply for diversity scholarships, but they make it very clear that they do not want you if you're a straight white male. What? Why? I would have the exact same impression, by the way, if they said anyone can apply for a scholarship except for a black homosexual woman, right? I'm like, well, why would you exclude them? Why would you exclude anybody? Just make a scholarship program for people who need it to come to your conference. It doesn't make any sense. It's absolutely asinine. But then you dig into it a little bit further and you realize this is the point of view. This is the attitudes of all of these people. Here, case in point, is Linus Torvalds. Linus Torvalds, the creator of the Linux kernel, right? I mean, a big wig in the tech world. Done some great work. Well, he has recently attacked people for using words like woke or being of the wrong political stance. Someone recently used the word woke, and Linus replied to him, and I'm going to read it to you now because I think it gives you a good idea of exactly where the leadership of these organizations are at. I think you might want to make sure you don't follow me because your woke communist propaganda comment, someone made a joke about woke communist propaganda, makes me think you're a moron of the first order. I strongly suspect I am one of those woke communists you worry about, but you probably couldn't actually explain what either of those words actually mean, could you? I'm a card-carrying atheist. I think a woman's right to choose is very important. I think that well-regulated militia means that guns should be carefully licensed and not just randomly given to any moron with a pulse, and I couldn't care less if you decide to dress up in the wrong clothes or decide you'd rather live your life without feeling tied to whatever plumbing you were born with. And damn it, if that makes me woke, then I think anybody who uses that word as a pejorative is a, quote, censored word disgrace to the human race. So please just unfollow me right now. This is a common thing. I mean, Linux leadership, open source leadership, tech company leadership, big tech leadership, pushing people who are not leftist out of their organization. Now you could say, oh well, he's just reasonably responding, except he's not being reasonable in his response to anything. It is swearing and vulgar and angry and abrasive and demanding that other people leave. Right? It's exclusionary. All of this is exclusionary. It's hate, and it's not cool. You see this throughout all of these organizations. I reported on this just a couple of days back. One of the biggest pieces of software in the open source world is GNOME. GNOME is this big desktop environment and set of applications that's used by Red Hat and IBM and Canonical and Ubuntu and so many other big companies. Also, Oracle uses them, right? It's all over the place. And they've been having some financial trouble. And they hired a shaman to lead them into the future. It's literally a true thing. They actually hired a shaman. I don't know why. A shaman with no background in software development. So I don't know what they were thinking exactly. But they then issued a 5-year plan. And that 5-year plan is very heavy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, many people will say, oh, well, that's fine. Diversity is fine. Inclusion is fine, except all of the things we've pointed out so far, with Red Hat and IBM and Microsoft and the Linux Foundation, Mozilla, on and on, all trumpet the exact same words: diversity, equity, and inclusion. They keep saying those words over and over and over again, and I don't think they mean what the words actually mean. They're not talking about diversity. They're talking about lack of diversity. They don't want people to be like, for example, Red Hat. They want less diversity, right? Because they want to exclude, not include, specific groups. Right? They're not talking about equality. What they're talking about is making sure that they hurt specific people they don't like. And that to me is extremely uncool. And I see this in the GNOME Foundation plan, which I go through at great length. And again, you can read all of it, and it talks about their inclusiveness and whatnot, and how that's going to lead them into the future, and it's going to be great. This is a common thing. But it's not just, again, we can't just stop there. It's not just the corporations. It's not just the foundations. It's the individual projects themselves. It's the open source projects that are out there, that are the small ones even, sometimes with a small group, sometimes with a big group, that are doing a lot of different open source software work that are specifically excluding people based on ideas, religions, religious beliefs, politics, and the like. Here's just a couple of quick examples that I published. This was from last year. There are two Linux projects out there that are actually kind of interesting. One is called Asahi Linux. And the whole point of Asahi is to put Linux on Apple hardware, right? You go buy a MacBook Air, you put something other than Mac OS on it, right? So they do all sorts of cool work to reverse engineer the hardware and get Linux on there, right? And then there's another one called Elementary. Elementary OS is basically just kind of a pretty Linux distribution that looks very, very nice. It's very polished looking and very classy looking. Well, both of the leaders of those organizations, the people that founded them and currently run them, so the top dog, have made very, very clear stances repeatedly now that they will not allow anyone in their project who is right-wing conservative, does not adequately praise transgender people and transgenderisms. You have to actually actively be pro-transgender to be in these organizations. And so if you're a white, straight, religious male and you're slightly conservative, you're just not going to be allowed here. It's one thing after another. Of just attacking and attacking. And I'm showing this on the screen. If you're listening to the podcast, go check out the article. But it's one thing after another of attacking those people. And talking literally, usually with huge amounts of swear words. And quote, "I don't give a beep about tech shouldn't be political garbage takes. Tech is made by people, and right-wing legislators in the U.S. are trying to kill my colleagues right now. There is no tech without people." No, of course, I don't know of any example where any right-wing legislator is trying to kill anybody. Oh, I don't know. I can't think of that example, and no example is given. But this sort of thing is coming rather constantly, fast and furious. It's off the charts. And then these people, they dislike me tremendously. I'll give you a few examples of that just because it's fun. But because I fall into all of these buckets, I am white, male, straight, religious, and conservative. Sometimes leading centrist in some of my ideals, but I fit all of the buckets they hate, so man, do they hate me. Quote, this is from the leader of the Elementary project. I'm going to be beeping explicit here in case you still don't get it. If you repost or platform or collaborate with people like Brian Lunduke, and I end up on the news, you are partially to blame. It is your fault for helping normalize people that are promoting hateful attitudes against trans people and me specifically. You are part of the spread of the violence that I experience. You are not neutral. Now, I don't know exactly what this guy's saying right there. I think he's saying he's going to attack me and try and kill me, and he'll get on the news for it if somebody has me on their podcast. In fact, he regularly goes on rants demanding that people not put me on their podcast. It's very, very strange. It's very, 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 very strange. This thing regularly happens. But this isn't just Again, now this isn't just big tech. This isn't just medium-sized tech. This isn't just the foundations or the small project. This goes into the news as well. Here's a quote from social media. My apologies for this quote. It's awful, but what can you do? From the guy that runs a website called osnews.com, which is, one of the tech news outlets out there. Quote, "Look, we all know how and why Lunduke went full Nazi. He tried to get PUSSY, and the PUSSY said no. That's how all conservatives," and he uses a lot of upper and lowercase there to, I guess, be insulting, "are born." And this sort of thing goes on. He swears about me with great regularity. Here's a recent comment from the head of software at a company called System 76, a kind of a mid-size hardware company. They make laptops and desktop computers, focusing again on Linux. And this is their head software guy. "I pay no mind to most political positions. The one thing I cannot tolerate is intolerance of the very people who make Cosmic their piece of software, just because of who they are, not what they have done. And this is exactly what Lunduke has continually vomited out to anyone who will listen." What's funny is I then responded to him, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Most of what I preach is that we should tolerate each other and we should stop discriminating each other. And here's some recent articles, some of which I just showed you, where I'm like, hey, discrimination is bad. I don't like discrimination, so he blocked me. So that's how that goes. And this sort of thing is constant. We talked just a little bit ago about that GNOME Foundation, right? Well, the GNOME Foundation is now directly working with organizations to actively promote a view of a black-only tech world. There's a group called Black Python Devs that I think has some good ideas, but their purpose is to only allow black people into their organization, which focuses on the Python programming language, and with the goal of increasing the number of black people within tech companies and tech conferences up to 100%, and to continue forever, as long as they can. They want to get to 100% black people. Now, the point of that appears to me to be exclusionary, right? No white people are allowed to join. No white people are allowed to take part. And if white people are driven out entirely, that's great. They'll keep going. I talked with the creator of this organization just about a week ago, and I asked him, okay, so if you get to 100% black people, and there are no more white people or Chinese people or anybody in these tech conferences and in these tech companies, you'll keep going. And he's like, yeah, we'll keep going forever because that's great. I'm like, okay, so what happened if I created a white Python devs organization, didn't allow black people in it, and then pushed until we got to 100% white people in the organizations? Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? And he's like, oh, that'd be bad. He was like, I don't like that. I think I'd have a conversation with you to stop that. I'm like, okay, so we're talking about racism and discrimination against white people. I even asked him point blank, have you heard of any discrimination against black people within the tech industry? He couldn't think of a single example, not even a general metaphorical example. He'd heard one time that one person was walking on a street and got yelled at by someone or something like that. That wasn't even at a tech conference. That was like the only thing he could come up with. So what we have here is a situation where there is no discrimination against black people or women or LGBTQIA plus people within the tech industry. That's just not happening. All of the discrimination is focused because it's all directed toward the group that they hate: white, male, straight, religious conservatives. And if you're one of those things, you get some hate. If you're all of those things, you get the full force of the hate. No tech news outlet will touch most of these topics, right? I mean, like the IBM and Red Hat leaks, those are huge. They're resulting in lawsuits because of that coverage. There's lawsuits going on. And I mean, these are big things. I mean, the Red Hat and IBM could face massive problems in the very near future because of their incredible hate they have towards white people, towards men, towards straight people, etc. And yet, you see almost zero coverage of these topics in not just mainstream news, but in the tech news that cover these companies. It is insane to me. It is truly insane, and I don't know 100% what to do about this. Because when you sit down to use software, whether it's Linux, we talked about quite a few Linux companies, or Windows, we talked about Microsoft and how they specifically want people to commit crimes against white men. Wild. When the people who make it hate you, I mean hate, you don't call for people to essentially go lynching white people unless you hate white people, right? You don't call for active discrimination against white people unless you hate white people. You don't declare that entire groups of people are rotten flesh that need to be cut out unless you really don't like that group. We're talking about hate here. So how do you fix that? I honestly don't know. I don't know. I mean, this has been explained to them over and over again. I've shown them this. I've published all these details. I've shown them their own quotes. But here's the thing. They already know what they're doing. They already know what they're saying. They know they're spreading hate. They know that. They know that when they say inclusivity, they mean exclusivity. They know that when they mean diversity, they mean anyone but the group we hate. They know that. They're not dumb. They can't be that dumb. They're saying it. The words are coming out of their mouth. And it's not just statements. These are actual active policies that are resulting in people getting fired, people getting banned, people being ostracized from communities. It's just happening. We're seeing the real world tangible results of the hatred. So what do we, as the people who are hated, do? Do we go over here and say, okay, well, we're just not going to be part of your organizations anymore? It's very difficult to do. I mean, there's Microsoft. You're just going to say, okay, we're not going to use anything that touches Microsoft software services, IBM, Red Hat, etc. As soon as you start cutting Microsoft, IBM, and Red Hat out of things, oh my word, you've got a real problem here, because that covers an awful lot of the software and hardware and online services that are out there. It also makes it so you're really limited in where you can work. It's limited in the communities you can be a part of, in the organizations that you can contribute to. So do you just say, okay, I'm going to do my best to not be part of this and move? Do you stay quiet and hopefully fly under the radar because you're only one or two, or at least as far as they know, of the hated groups? So you don't meet all five or whatever of the check boxes to be fully hated, you know? So you just stay quiet. Don't tell people that you're religious. Don't tell people you're straight. Make them think maybe you're not straight, maybe you're gay, maybe you're trans or something, so that you don't get discriminated against. Do you make them think that, oh, maybe you're not conservative, maybe you are left-leaning, just so that you don't get fired, just so that you're allowed in the organizations? That seems awful. What an awful way to live. You got to go secret, you got to go private, you got to go underground, you got to go into hiding. I'm going to tell you straight up, as a Jewish man, I don't like that. I'm not a fan. I'm a very religious guy, and my people have had that sort of problem where you've had to go underground and hide who you are in order to survive. And it's not cool. Let's not do that. There was a point, well, there was, in the 80s, sometime in the 90s, where people, at least where I was living, were just fine with everybody. Whatever your skin color, whatever your religion, we were just cool with people, right? It just wasn't a problem. Even when we disagreed, it wasn't a problem. 10 years ago, heck, you could work in a company and, most people kept their religious and political beliefs to themselves. And, maybe we have a chat about it when we're having a burger and a pint down at Red Robin or wherever we're hanging out, right? But at work, we kind of keep that to ourselves. We're not gonna start a bunch of religious and political arguments and whatnot. But no one was being discriminated against, right? There might have been issues where there was like a quota here where we're like, oh, we have to, meet some affirmative action standard where we have to hire a couple of women or things like that. Not that I'm not, by the way, I need to make this clear. there are very few women applying to developer positions. So I used to work as a manager of developers, and I was given a quota. It was a very low quota of here, I have to meet this line of I have to hire this many women into the organization in order to meet, some corporate and government goals. And it was very difficult to do because I didn't get enough female applicants. Not enough women were actually applying on their resume where I could interview enough of them. I ended up having to hire whoever applied if they happened to be a lady. It was not good for them or for us. It was terrible. I did not like it at all. But just the same, that was minor compared to the situation we have now. Right? That was a minor weird blip. It wasn't great. It was the first steps. It was tiny steps on the road to where we're at now, right? It was a little bit of discrimination. It wasn't great. It didn't help anybody, and it hurt other people, and it was uncomfortable, and it was awkward, and it wasn't fantastic. And then we kept going as a society down that road ever further, and now we're at a place where it's just outright blatant. These companies, these organizations, these founders, these leaders, they absolutely hate you if you're white, male, straight, religious, and conservative. Hate. And you're not allowed, and you're blocked, and you're banned, and you're lied about, and you're ostracized, and you're fired. That's not cool. That's not cool happening to anybody. And it needs to end. But I don't know how to end it. All I can think of is that it needs to be talked about. So I'm talking about it now. I'm going to link to all of these that we talked about today. I'm going to put them inside the notes for this particular episode. Share them. Verify them. Look through them. And if you disagree with them, if you are on the political left, if you are agreeing with the policies of these companies, if you agree with the racist, discriminatory, exclusionary policies that are in place at these organizations, look through all this and think about maybe why. Why do you dislike white, male, straight, religious conservatives so much? Because I'm going to tell you right now, the white, male, straight, religious conservatives are not trying to ostracize anybody. And notice I'm not calling for any group of people to be excluded from any of these organizations or companies. In fact, I can't think of a single conservative person in a leadership position, whether it's at a news outlet like mine, or at a company, or at a major foundation. I can't think of a single one who has said, if you aren't straight and actively promoting being straight, you can't be here. I've never heard of that. If you're not white, you can't be around. I've never heard of that. That's not something that's happening. Right? That is literally not something that's happening. There's the discrimination, the racism, the sexism is only going one way. It's only pointed in one direction. And we need to be clear about that, and we need to be honest about that before we can even hope to figure out what the heck the next steps are. And there has to be next steps to figure out our way out of this. But we're going to be, until then, I'm going to keep harping on it. I'm going to keep talking about it because I love computers. Computers bring me joy. Software and hardware, it brings me joy. I spend a tremendous amount of time talking about and studying computer history. I mean, heck, I just published 2 articles just earlier today about computer history. They weren't even political in any way, shape, or form. It was just the pure joy of computer history. And I want to be able to focus entirely on that, entirely on the nerdy stuff that brings me joy. Retro computing and computer history and programming and the fun stuff. But I cannot allow what is happening right now to continue. I can't allow it because it is ruining the fun of computing. All of you who are out there pushing for this DEI nonsense, because it doesn't mean diversity or inclusion. It doesn't mean those things. You're lying when you say it does. But people who are using those words and pushing those words of DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion, over and over again, really pushing it, are doing fundamental harm to the entirety of the computer industry and computing as a hobby and to the people involved in it. And it's not cool, and it needs to stop. And it needs to be unacceptable. That behavior needs to be unacceptable. And I want to be clear about this. It's not that those people need to be unacceptable, right? People can have whatever ideas they want, but that behavior should not be allowed within these organizations, right? These are all official. What we talked about here today was official statements, official policies that exclude, that discriminate, that are bigoted, that are hateful. And we need to talk about it more. Share this with everybody. Share these articles with everybody. Talk about this, how you don't support the hate. I can't be the only person on the hill yelling about this, but I will if I have to be, until everyone else starts talking about it too. If you have any pull in any of these tech news outlets, convince them to start talking about all of the hate and provide them with all of my content. They'll copy me on it just like they copy me on almost everything else anyway. I don't mind, but we need to talk about it more. All right. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who makes this possible. Thank you to everyone who subscribes and supports the Lunduke Journal at lunduke.com or lunduke.locals.com, where you can find all of this good stuff, along with a mountain of non-political, very delightful, super happy tech nerdy stuff to kind of wash away, cleanse the palate after dealing with all this ugh. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.